There was once a man crafted out of bronze that guarded the island of Crete, and his name was Talos. Created by Hephaestus, he moved as a man, spoke as a man, had wishes as a man, and running from his head to his ankles he had a single vein that flowed with ichor, which like blood, if he lost, he would bleed to death. And though he had a mind and will of his own, it was Medea, a witch, who used old magics to twist him from sanity and reason to madness. With all of this, did Talos not have all the essential properties of a human, despite being Hephaestus's created machine? Or is man equally a machine, governed by the laws of nature instead of programming? When does artificial intelligence become human? And more importantly, when do they deserve rights? This question has been at the heart of many fantastic stories, from Asimov to the Talos Principle to Detroit Become Human. This video is brought to you by my amazing patrons who encourage me to finally write this essay on a subject that I have been incredibly passionate about for a long time. If you'd like to support the channel, this kind of content, and join our nerdy Discord and Patreon community, then it'd mean the world for you to contribute just a couple of dollars a month and follow the link down below. Firstly, this question requires us to define which things make us human, and most people start with our biology. At first we think about opposable thumbs, the details of the eye, hairlessness, those sort of things. But it starts to get complicated when we think about it hard. A human born without an arm or a leg, or an amputee using an artificial limb, is not considered less human. Nor can we say someone who has all of their biological arms and legs is considered more fully human. If this is so, then the brass arms, feet, hands, and legs of Talos do not make him less human. What about blood then? Well, rapidly more people are being kept alive with synthetic blood transfusions, and hearts, the very core of our being where ancients believed the soul could have resided, is often being replaced with artificial versions in old age. And yet, we wouldn't consider people with these new augmentations less human. If this is so, then the ichor that runs through Talos's copper veins and bronze chest do not make him less human either. Even DNA is just a biological library of information transmitted across time and inherited by each new generation, and it can now be edited with advancing technologies such as CRISPR, all of which can be simulated in a technological code inherited by each new generation of AI. So if it's not about what our arms or chest or legs or blood are made of, then what defines us as human must be something less superficial, skin deep per se. Perhaps it's the experience of birth, being conceived and growing in the mother's womb, a natural experience that no technology can simulate. Except for IVF assisting millions of parents in conceiving and record numbers of humans being grown in test tubes that are widely regarded as marvels of science. And being born in that conventional way isn't even required, with anywhere between a third and half of all births being via cesarean. The result is that humanity is left in this limbo, neither fully biological nor fully mechanical, right back to the day we are conceived. In Donna Harraway's 1985 essay, The Cyborg Manifesto, she put this sentiment best. We are all chimeras, theorized and fabricated hybrids of machine and organism. Artificial intelligence, if it has a body, could have bones of steel, veins of copper, a skin of silicone, constructed rather than naturally born. But this cannot exclude them from the definition of human. The two questions of when AI becomes human and when we need to recognize their rights are intimately connected. They both ultimately come down to how we draw a distinction between humanity and anything else. For all the reasons aforementioned, this distinction isn't really biological. Amputees, the elderly who rely on pacemakers, people with dentures for teeth, or braces, or hip replacements, or drugs that alter brain chemistry, or children born with mechanical or chemical assistance are still believed to deserve equal rights, despite those differences in biology and experience. What defines the human and our rights have historically gone to something deeper. In Schwitzgebel and Garza's paper, A Defense of the Rights of Artificial Intelligence, they rightly conclude that it shouldn't matter to one's moral status what kind of body one has, except insofar as one's body influences one's psychological and social properties. So it doesn't matter if you're a 400-foot tall purple platypus bear with pink horns and silver wings, provided you have these mental or moral abilities that they allude to. Of course, this does lead us to the heart of the issue, the perplexing philosophical question. What are these elusive psychological and social properties that make us human and give us rights? To answer this, we'll be looking at Immanuel Kant, an 18th century Enlightenment philosopher that provided perhaps the most robust understanding of what these properties are that an artificial intelligence might need to be human. Kant's focus was on what he called the categorical imperative, and the rational capacities needed to recognize it, which he discussed at length in Groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals. This imperative is a way of figuring out what's right and wrong, that you don't consider the consequences of a particular act, but the act itself is moral, because, no matter the circumstances, you should always do that thing. For example, a being should not kidnap. It doesn't matter if you want a pretty boy to be your boyfriend, kidnapping by itself is wrong. It doesn't matter what the outcome would be. Kant phrased it in saying, act only according to that maxim whereby you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. The rational capacity, or psychological property that Kant is concerned with here, is the ability to assess this categorical imperative, to see where it applies. This is that a being is capable of reasoning about their conduct and freely deciding what they will do. There are two standards here that an AI has to meet. Firstly, in assessing the categorical imperative, that they reach their conclusion with reason, and secondly, that they do so freely. Kant believed that only humans were capable of recognizing the imperative in this way. With that, Kant argues that because he has these capacities, a rational being is responsible for his actions. Recognizing the imperative becomes the basis of rights, because when an AI gains this ability, if they become equally responsible for their actions, then they must be equally entitled to the same rights that come with those responsibilities. But can AI satisfy these two standards? Well, they seem to satisfy the first relatively easily. The code that goes into their design gives them a baseline reason through which to make decisions. They follow the reason they have to its logical conclusion. However, whether AI satisfies the second of Kant's requirements is a lot more difficult to say. One of the great problems that we face with AI is that it's incredibly difficult to tell whether the choice they make is because the logic that led them to that decision was coded into them, or whether they learned and freely chose themselves. Your calculator uses reason to tell you that 3 times 4 is 12, but it didn't do so freely. It has no agency of its own. Even programs such as Cleverbot or Siri follow the reason given to them in complex codes that attempt to simulate human interaction, but ultimately, they don't do so freely. When faced with the categorical imperative, they could do no more than follow what is essentially instinct, their code. With this in mind, we might think that Talos could not be regarded as human per se, nor deserve rights because he was designed by Hephaestus and followed the reason given to him in those designs. But this is where it gets even trickier. Even humans are governed by the reason coded into their DNA. Our flight or fight instincts decide what we do when we are threatened, or at least heavily influence it. The choice to flee or fight follows reason, but it's not quite clear if it can be described as free by Kant's standard. Artificial intelligence would become human when it is able to recognize Kant's categorical imperative, A, with reason, and B, freely, even if they are partially governed by their code in the same way that humans are partially governed by their DNA or Talos was partially governed by Hephaestus's design. But when they do, they become morally responsible, and with that, become entitled to the rights that come with those responsibilities. One example of Kant's theory in a story about artificial intelligence is Detroit Become Human. Kara intervenes to protect Alice from her abusive father, Todd. She recognizes the categorical imperative that children should not be abused. Now, Kara reached her decision with the reasoning that no matter the circumstances, no child ever deserves to be abused. And though her programming to be a mother-like android may have played a part, we know that she did this freely, because she defined part of her programming that required she obey Todd, her owner, in order to protect Alice. Because of this, it is in this moment that she becomes human, recognizing the categorical imperative both freely and with reason. This philosophy is underpinned by a second psychological property that Gewirth identified in relation to Kant's theory: the ability to recognize the indispensable conditions of agency and action as necessary goods. What this means is that an artificial intelligence needs to recognize that their own autonomy and ability to choose for themselves are inherently valuable things. Because of this, they go on to make what Gewirth calls a prudential rights claim to protect them, essentially asking others to respect their rights. However, in Kant's theory, these things aren't inherently valuable because some divine law says that they are. No. It's because the only way to logically justify and protect your rights is if you also agree to see the autonomy of others as inherently valuable and protect that for them too. So, our AI might have a body of steel, copper, plastic, and silicone, with the ability to assess Kant's categorical imperative freely and with reason. But there are still three important philosophical objections to the rights of AI we should consider: the objection from non-identity, the objection from Hobbes, and the objection from eternal debt. Whether you accept the arguments around these objections is up to you, and I would love to hear your thoughts down below. In the objection from non-identity, we must consider the following. Hephaestus brought Talos into existence with the intention of him defending the island of Crete. Without that purpose in mind for his creation, Talos would not exist, and so, he cannot complain if he has to abide by it. This confronts us with an uncomfortable reality of AI. Very rarely do humans create without intent for application. Artificial intelligence would not be created to be ends in themselves, as Kant would put it, but as a means to a more efficient regulation of shipping lines, companionship for the elderly, or replication of a genuine relationship of love with a female. All of these things can be seen in Detroit Become Human in characters like North, Marcus, and Simon. The argument goes that AI cannot complain about being deprived rights because without that purpose, they would have never existed. Because of this, living with one's existence being conditional on diminished rights must be better than non-existence. Traditionally, this argument has been applied to animals raised for meat. Now, while some would question whether it should even be applied to them, most would agree that it does not apply to those with the psychological properties we discussed before, whether they be human or artificial intelligence. Although a child owes their existence to their parents in some sense, the parents cannot call this in as a debt and make them do things. Secondly, there is also the brutal objection from Hobbes, which is complicated. Essentially, Hobbes' philosophy has a sort of tribalism to it, meaning those inside our society are to be treated ethically, but we have no obligation to treat outsiders to the same standard, meaning we can kill, kidnap, or torture them by locking them in a room and making them watch the Avatar: The Last Airbender movie for 16 hours straight. Aliens arriving to Earth, for example, being entirely outside humanity, would be considered outsiders that we owe nothing to at all. People might reasonably say the same about artificial intelligence. Being entirely outside our society, they don't deserve any rights, sentient or not. But it's not clear that this argument holds up. AI, being the creation of humans, could be considered more like children under Hobbes' philosophy than outsiders. Talos was brought into existence by Hephaestus, with his design and his will. In much the same way, artificial intelligence would inherit the knowledge and learning of their creators. Their coding and their bodies would be by the design of scientists, like DNA passed on to children. In the most material way, AI would be children that we have brought into society, with humanity as their parents. Thus, AI would be a part of the society and entitled to being treated ethically, that they don't have to sit and watch Avatar: The Last Airbender the film for 16 hours straight. And finally, there is the objection from eternal debt, in which we must consider the following. Would Hephaestus have created Talos if he knew that he would have to work an hour every single day to create the ichor that ran in his veins as blood to keep him alive? Arguably not. It will be a considerable financial investment to develop artificial intelligence, and once created, there may be expenses to sustain them, if only in the cost of power or upkeep, renting a premises for them, or repairing their android body, should they have one. It is possible that these creators would not have brought them into existence if they knew that they would be obligated to pay these expenses forever. There are two common responses to this. Firstly, the dependence autonomy argument. Even if your mother might die because you refuse to give her one of your kidneys, you cannot be compelled to give it up, nor would many find you directly responsible for your mother's death, even if you might be shunned a little bit for such a dick move. Likewise, each person's autonomy is paramount, even to the point where the AI dies because no one worked to ensure they had the electricity needed or fix their mechanical body when it was breaking down. But this moralistic model ignores one thing that leads on to the second, and perhaps more persuasive, argument, what philosophers call voluntaristic special obligations. Our chart gives perhaps the clearest analogy for special obligations humanity has to AI. Those who cause children to exist must thereby incur an obligation that they are adequately cared for. As discussed, artificial intelligence shares something of a parental relationship with its creators, being born of the design or accident through no choice of its own, inheriting whatever parts it may have from its creator, but crucially, with human-grade capacities, there is something of a parental connection between them. The biological birth isn't required to be human, and we must really wonder what a parental relationship is. Who knows? Perhaps as Hephaestus should care for Talos, we too should care for this next generation, our technological children. The stories of Kara, Marcus, and Connor in Detroit, the android in the Talos Principle, the Terminator, Asimov's works in the 50s all tackle the question of AI in unique and confronting ways. But one day, these will no longer be just stories. One day, Talos will walk among us in a living, soulful man. It's up to us, but soon, they might just be one of us. I've had a passion for this kind of philosophy around artificial intelligence for years, ever since I played the Talos Principle back in 2014. Genuinely, one of the best games I have ever played, completely recommend it, especially for philosophy. I in fact dedicated 2 whole essays in my classes this year, in my philosophy class and my science fiction class, to the philosophy of AI, so that I could better research and write this video and do the topic justice. Now, sadly, the video format limits how much I can say. I've had to cut thousands and thousands of words and exclude whole academic discussions around other philosophers and what rights mean to them to fit this template. However, if you would like to read my academic arguments in full, I have made them entirely available, including the sources I used and all that, on Patreon, available to my patrons. They're over there now, you can read them, and if that interests you, I would love for you to come support me there. It's only a couple of dollars per month, and it also allows me to do these more interesting, I guess to me personally, because I love philosophy, videos every so often. It's their support that allows me to do that, and so I can deviate from my normal content occasionally. But more importantly, what do you think? What makes us human and why? Let me know down in the comments below. Stay nerdy, and I will see you in the future.